Hello everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and I promised you one more ups and downs, so here it is. Now obviously, as season 1 has aired, I have gone through each episode weekly and given you an in-depth ups and downs review of that individual episode. But now that the season has wrapped up, I want to talk more broadly about season 1 as a whole. Obviously, there have been some things that people have taken issue with, there are some things that have worked really well for season 1 as a whole. So let's get straight into the ups and downs for Doctor Who Season 1.
Into the vortex.
So let's kick things off with a nice up, which is Ncuti Gatwa's performance as the 15th Doctor. He just embodies the fun-loving spirit of the character so well, and he really delivers in every single episode. Those speeches that he delivers are perfect, and whether you agree with it or not, in those moments that are very emotional, he is brilliant in the performance. I'm going to come back to the emotional element in a little while, but you cannot deny, whether you agree with the emotion or not, that the performance itself is brilliant. I mean, think about the ending of Dot and Bubble. Fantastic. Boom. The intensity in Boom. Even the moment where he's talking to Poppy in Space Babies. He has done it all, and he's done it all very, very well. I do think it is important for the Doctor to change over time, and it is interesting to have a Doctor who is more in touch with his emotions. Whether I think that worked entirely, it doesn't remain to be seen, I'll tell you in a second. But overall, I think it was a very interesting suggestion to explore a different angle of the character. Now, in terms of Millie Gibson's performance as Ruby, I'm going to be entirely honest here. I don't have an up or a down for it. I don't really have a strong feeling towards that performance in the positive or in the negative. She did have some standout moments. I mean, 73 yards, she carried that episode and she did so very, very well. But my overall response to the character of Ruby, and by extension then the performance by Millie, was just kind of a bit meh. I didn't really ever feel strongly connected to the character emotionally, which isn't to say that she was played awfully. I just didn't feel a massively strong connection to her either way. So I did say I would come to it, so let's just get straight into it and get it out of the way. Down for this season, an overuse of heightened emotional responses. Now don't get me wrong, I do like that we have a Doctor who is more in touch with his emotions, but I feel as though it happened just a few times too many and then it started to lose its impact. And as I previously said, every single time this does happen, Ncuti Gatwa's performance itself is incredible. But for me personally, I think the first time we should have seen this should have been in Boom. In Boom, it felt warranted. In fact, every other emotional outburst after Boom did feel warranted. But because it happened in literally every episode from the Church on Ruby Road to Empire of Death, those moments lost their power, because they almost became predictable. Now please don't get me wrong, I can already hear people screaming toxic masculinity at me. I am not saying that I don't think men should cry, that I don't think men are strong if they do cry. That is not what I'm saying. But fundamentally, when you look at the characteristics of the Doctor, I don't feel like the amount of crying we saw this season fit those fundamental characteristics. I mean, let's twist it. If this had happened in Jodie's run, everybody would have said that she was acting too emotional for the character of the Doctor, and everyone would have attributed that to the fact that she was a woman. But when you look at it at the basic level, it's nothing to do with whether it's a male or female actor playing the character. The Doctor doesn't break easily, and that is a strong fundamental characteristic of the character. I mean, let's take a look at some of the previous Doctors. They had moments of outbursts, but how much more impactful were they? Because they didn't happen all the time. Think about 11, for example. It's pretty fun-loving, pretty goofy, doesn't have much of an edge to him, and then suddenly we have the Colonel Runaway moment. We have the moment he starts crying in the name of the Doctor when he learns about Trenzalore. Those scenes were great because they really hit you because they were so unlike the Doctor. Those moments of vulnerability. The thing is as well is when you have a Doctor like 15 who is so high energy and positive, if you had had only one or two of those moments of crying and breaking down and showing a bit more vulnerability, they would have been so impactful and effective. I mean, who knows, maybe this is something that will grow on me as a viewer. And Russell T Davies and Ncuti Gatwa have made it very clear that they want to explore a more emotional Doctor. So I don't think this is going to go away. So maybe I need to reevaluate my thoughts and feelings towards this particular characteristic that they've introduced to the character. I just think what they need to do is reevaluate how often they have these moments. Because surely they can see that the impact has dwindled the more it happens. Unfortunately, I do have to continue the streak of downs, because I feel as though the relationship between Ruby and the Doctor never felt fully established. You had a few moments of banter here and there that showed potential, but these moments never went beyond surface level. And then the Doctor was absent for the majority of 73 Yards, and both Ruby and the Doctor were pretty secondary to the plot of Dot and Bubble. There was a lot of telling us that they were best friends, but not a lot of showing us that they were best friends. And I think when it comes down to it, we didn't really see these characters interacting outside of really high-stakes situations. We didn't have those slower, more fun moments that just show the character development and the relationship development. And to be honest, the solution for this is fairly simple, and that is to bring back those scenes where the Doctor and Companion are just interacting inside the TARDIS. Just give us a few more slower moments like that. I mean, the classic series was literally built around moments like that. They were really, really prevalent in New Who as well. These are the moments that show us that character building, the relationship building, and make us fall in love with this duo. Let's think about the moment that Riversong flies into the TARDIS and Amy's like, what's going on here? And then there's all that banter like, it's not supposed to make that noise, you leave the brakes on. That's how we start to establish this sarcastic relationship between them, this banter-driven relationship, this flirtatious relationship. We had none of that with Ruby and the Doctor, and I'm not saying it needed to be flirtatious, but we didn't have anything. So we never really saw that relationship build. We just saw them in high-stakes situations and were told they were best friends. But I didn't believe it because I hadn't seen it. And I think another issue with this relationship is they never clashed. There was never any disagreements between them. Think about 9 and Rose. They were disagreeing literally in the first episode. Amy and 11. Why did you say 5 minutes? Instantly, conflict. This is what gives texture and layers and levels to a friendship. Any sort of friendship or relationship. Nobody gets along 100% of the time. It just doesn't happen. But in this season, it was just full on everyone gets along all the time. And it's not believable. I think the most conflict we saw between these characters probably came in Boom, when Ruby refused to leave the Doctor. And that's probably one of the best parts of the episode. It started to show that we could have had these moments between them, but that's all we really got. In this relationship, there was no ups and downs. See what I did there? And so it didn't feel genuine. I also think that having the Doctor missing from 73 Yards probably didn't help either. And then that's followed by yet another Doctor Light episode, albeit a Doctor and Companion Light episode, but I think when you're coming into your first season, introducing these new characters, fundamentally, it's not helpful to have your main character missing for 2 of the episodes. And even Russell T Davies himself said that if it wasn't for the scheduling conflicts with filming Sex Education, he wouldn't have chosen to do that. So I think even he realises that this was maybe a poor choice. But we've done a lot of negative speaking there, so let's move to another up for this season. There is a variety of concepts spread across these episodes. Each episode was very different from the next, which I think worked very, very well. I mean, look at what we had. We had a Hitchcock thriller, we had a period musical, we had a Welsh folk horror, we had Black Mirror social media echo chamber story, we had a big unit finale, and obviously Doctor Who has tried to do this to the best of its ability in the past. But it worked way better here. And I think a lot of that is to do with the budget. We didn't have lots of samey corridors and reused quarries. Every location was different, every setting was different, because the budget allowed for that. You know, they really swung for the fences with all their concepts here, and for the most part it paid off, with the exception maybe of Space Babies going just a little bit too far. And in a similar vein, I think season 1 was at its best when it changed up the writers too. Now, we all know that Russell T Davies can write a brilliant script for Doctor Who, but it does say something when the highlights of this season are the 2 episodes that were actually written by different writers. So you had Boom, which was written by Stephen Moffat, and you had Rogue, which was written by the writing duo of Kate Herron and Bryony Redman. I think there is a general consensus that these are 2 of the top episodes of the season, and so it does beg the question as to whether having fresh eyes and ears within the creative process of Doctor Who is a positive thing. I would say it absolutely is. The thing is, Russell T Davies has always been really good at show running and world building, but in terms of the storytelling, the individual storytelling, I think this maybe proves that that's not so much his strong point, and he would do well to bring in other writers in the future to make sure that there's a freshness to each episode of a season. Now, what is good is season 2 has 4 writers that aren't Russell T Davies. Now, one of them might be Stephen Moffat, but still, that's at least 3 new writers coming in for season 2. Let's leave Russell to the show running, which he does very well, and get some fresh eyes and ears and writing hands into the future of Doctor Who, because those 2 episodes, like I said, are probably the strongest 2. But while we're on the topic of the episodes, down the episode count. 8 episodes at 45 minutes was not enough. Now, beyond the selfishness of just, I want more Doctor Who, there was way too much to cram into not enough time. I mean, when you look at it, you've got 7 separate stories, 7 separate casts, 7 separate settings that you've all got to fit together and pay off. And then along the lines with all of that, you've also got the overall arcs of the season, such as Ruby's mother and Susan Twist as well. And then on top of all of that, you've got to somehow fit in the building and development of characters and their relationships, which I've just commented on saying they failed to do. Now, most shows don't have all of these different things to contend with for each episode, and so they can afford to have fewer episodes. But I think in this instance, we could have done with at least 10 episodes, or at least an hour-long 8 episodes. And I think because they were trying to cram so much into these shorter episodes, the pacing felt off in a lot of them, and for the most part that ended up with at least one element of each story feeling undercooked or rushed. For example, the whole Roger Ap-Gwilliam situation in 73 Yards, I felt like I needed a few more minutes of character development or anything just to do with that. It just felt a little bit underdeveloped. In Space Babies, all of a sudden, the Doctor feels sorry for the bogeyman and is trying to save it, but I feel like we needed an extra scene or two to, as an audience, start to feel a connection and feel sorry for the bogeyman. But as it stands, all of a sudden we went from being scared and running away from the bogeyman to wanting to save it, and I felt like that felt very rushed. I just feel like there were a few moments within most of the episodes that could have done with just a few more minutes, a few more scenes to let them breathe a bit more and develop them a little bit more. And on this note, I honestly do think that launching with 2 episodes in one go probably wasn't the wisest move. This made the season feel even shorter because we had 1 less week of episodes. But what you really want to do is build up the show, and nowadays there's so much more to contend with. You know, New Who in its day didn't have that much competition, whereas now you've got to compete with all the Star Wars TV series, the MCU TV series. Why not have 9 or 10 episodes spread across 9 or 10 weeks to get the hype building and try and stand out amongst all of these TV shows? Now, I'm not saying that it should be quantity over quality, but I do feel like that they went a little bit too far in the opposite direction here, and the quantity wasn't quite enough. And I can hear what you're going to say. Well, New Who has always been pretty much 45-minute episodes with the exception of a few, so what are you talking about? Well, that just goes to show that it is possible to fit a decent story in a 45-minute episode, but remember that most of the New Who series back in the day were 12, 13 episodes long. Those extra 5 episodes really do make a massive difference in terms of character building, stretching out a story arc, carrying on a mystery, and I think that was lacking here. But let's move on to another positive taken up. You all knew it was coming. Murray Gold. Half of what makes an episode such an enjoyable experience or such an emotionally gripping experience is down to Murray Gold's score. He just gets it. Every single time Murray Gold just hits the nail on the head with his musical score. And it's not just the new stuff. The new stuff is amazing and really beautiful, especially 15's theme, Ruby's theme as well, especially when it's played on the piano in The Devil's Chord, but also the way that he incorporates score from his previous runs in Doctor Who. You know, when he brought back the theme of Gallifrey, when Gallifrey is mentioned, the way he mixes his old work into the new stuff, to give you that connection and that callback, to make you remember things that you might have forgotten. Music is a really powerful thing. And he, like I said, Murray Gold just gets it. He gets Doctor Who.
So the one that was adopted was the only one left?
Also, big up for him for having a cameo in The Devil's Cord. Good on you, mate. And while we're on the topic of ups, let's have another one for the practical and CGI effects across this season. You know, we've had such a wide variety of settings, creatures, costumes across this season. You've gone from the kind of more traditional monsters, such as the man-traps in Dot and Bubble, or the Cholder, which is more of the traditional kind of human with prosthetics, all the way to the fully CGI'd Sutek. The 60s to the Regency era to a full-blown alien planet. And they all looked incredible. Not to mention dinosaurs. And this is something that I have commented on massively from the 60th onwards. The marriage between the practical and the digital has been balanced very, very well across the board, particularly this season. And then they've been incorporating some of this state-of-the-art technologies like the giant LED screens that we used in Boom. From a technical point of view, this season has done incredibly well and has looked beautiful across the board. It's also been a lot more vibrant and colourful this season, which I think helps kind of retain that Doctor Who goofiness and fun-loving spirit, which was maybe lacking a little bit in the Chibnall era in terms of the colour palettes and things. So I think they did very well there. Unfortunately, that does bring me to another down. And that is the whole Ruby's mother mystery and reveal. I think the reveal itself of Ruby's mother being just an ordinary woman worked very well, and I totally get the message they were trying to send with that reveal. But the build-up and the execution overall felt very misleading. The big clues that were dropped throughout the season were designed to lead us down a path of anticipating a supernatural or fantastical reveal. And that would have been a very acceptable bait and switch with the reveal that she was just ordinary at the end if we were given an acceptable, feasible explanation for all of those clues in the end. But instead, we were kind of just left asking more questions like, why did it snow? Why was there a song inside Ruby? Why was she pointing so dramatically at a road sign that wasn't originally there? Why was she shrouded so dramatically? I think when it really comes down to it, viewers were left after this episode unsure about how they were supposed to be feeling. Should they be feeling disappointed because that's it for the mystery, and if so, it was kind of underwhelming? Or should they be anticipating further exploration of this next season? But we weren't really dropped enough hints to expect more exploration of this next season. We weren't given a little carrot dangled there to make us think that there's more to this. And so at the moment, there is an air of disappointment that we felt very misled with the clues that were being dropped. And like I said, I've said this a few times in various videos over the last couple of weeks. The reveal itself, I take no issue with. I like it. I think in the long run, it's going to be the right decision. But I do feel like the build-up, the execution, the misleading clues and hints didn't get a good enough payoff at the end or a good enough explanation to appease our inquisitive minds. Instead, we were just left asking more questions that we, at the moment, don't know if we're going to get answers to, and kind of feels like we won't. Something that I will say I have thoroughly enjoyed throughout this new season, though, has been the return of some form of Doctor Who Confidential. Obviously, it's not Doctor Who Confidential, it is Unleashed. Basically, it's the same thing, although this time we have the host, Stefan Powell, who is very, very, very Welsh, and I'm not mad about it. I really like him, I think he's pretty fun. I have really, really enjoyed being able to go back behind the scenes of Doctor Who. I used to love watching Doctor Who Confidential, and I'm so glad that we have some form of that returning in the form of Unleashed. So I hope that continues. And I think it really does highlight things. I mean, like I said, when I first watched The Star Beast, for example, I assumed that the Meep was pretty much all CGI until I then watched Unleashed and was blown away by how much of the Meep was achieved practically. So you actually really do learn things watching Unleashed. So I'm really glad to see that back. Taken up, and I'm going to quick fire through my top moments of season 1 as a whole. In no particular order, we have Ruby's death sequence in Boom. This was a moment that genuinely shocked me. I sat there gasping. I didn't expect it to happen. It came out of nowhere. And I think that Ncuti's response to the moment was absolutely perfect. And I think it was the first moment in season 1 that I really did feel shocked and surprised by something that had happened. Next, the transformation of Susan Triad at the end of The Legend of Ruby Sunday. Now, I'm not talking about the big cliffhanger or anything like that. I mean the actual transformation of lovely Susan Triad turning into a really creepy acolyte of Sutek. This was the fear factor that I felt was lacking throughout a lot of season 1. This is what I had been looking for, the thing that genuinely scares you. And I really thought that paid off well. And even in Empire of Death, where we had her return, she still really creeped me out. When Mel also transformed, she was equally as scary. I like it when Doctor Who is scary. And so that was a real top moment for me. Then we have Ruby at the piano in The Devil's Chord. I mean, I'm a sucker for beautiful music, especially when it's in a lovely montage such as this. As I keep saying, Murray Gold is an absolute genius. His music in this scene in particular just worked so well. It was a real driving force for the episode. It was significant. I loved the fact that it went from being kind of the cross between diegetic and non-diegetic, and that whole mix and overlapping of the two. I just think as a whole moment, it was really beautiful. Then we have the whole can't get you out of my head sequence in Rogue. I love it when the Doctor is sassy and sarcastic and playful, and I think this is one of the first times I really felt that from this version of the Doctor. Albeit it was quite late in the season, and there were a few moments before then that probably did stand out as well, but for me, this was the moment that I really felt like, yes, this is what the Doctor should be. Yes, there are serious moments, but he also has fun and is playful and can mess around with people, and I really enjoyed that moment as a whole. The ending of Dot and Bubble. Now, I know I have just said that perhaps there was maybe too many moments of heightened emotional responses in this season, but in this instance, I absolutely feel that it worked. I really felt his disbelief in the moment, I felt his anguish in the moment, and in terms of moments that really warranted that sort of response, this one, I think, absolutely was deserving of that much emotion. As I previously said, I think because there were other moments where it had already happened and perhaps didn't need to, maybe some people felt by this point that it was too much, and that's why I feel like there shouldn't have been so many beforehand, because imagine how much more powerful this moment would have been if we hadn't seen him cry prior to this moment. But overall, I still think it was one of the most hard-hitting and powerful scenes that Ncuti Gatwa has performed as the 15th Doctor. And just a bonus mention has to go to Kate and Colonel Sexy. I wish you all the best. I ship it. I know some people don't. I absolutely do. And I thought it was a great moment, especially Colonel Sexy completely dissing Susan Triad's tea-making skills. A bonus little highlight there. Overall, I did like this season. It did have some issues that perhaps made me not enjoy it quite as much as I hoped I would, but there were no moments that I fundamentally hated. And I didn't walk away from this season completely disliking any of the episodes. I think overall it was a very enjoyable viewing experience. Perhaps it didn't quite have the spark I was hoping would return with Russell T Davies and this big refresh, but overall it was still enjoyable. And I'm hoping that it's only going to get better moving into season 2. Obviously, we've been on an absolute roller coaster of a ride, going through all the theories and speculations in the build-up to this season, and we've had a great time doing it. Whether those theories paid off or not remains to be seen in some regards, but we've absolutely had a great time doing it, and we hope that you stick with us in this little hiatus gap now before the Christmas special, because we are not done. We will have plenty more to discuss with you. There are still things that we haven't quite got to yet that we want to talk about from Empire of Death, from season 1, so don't go anywhere because we are not going anywhere. Obviously, Empire of Death had a massive amount of Easter eggs, so if you haven't gone and checked out the 2 videos we have on those Easter eggs, then make sure that you do. And we do have a ranking of every modern Doctor Who series coming very soon as well, so keep your eyes peeled on the channel. Thank you for joining me on this lovely journey through season 1 of Doctor Who. I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of Riversong herself, goodbye, sweeties.